We're seeing something right now that's a pretty rare occurrence on the Kaspa chart and is typically seen 50 to 100% gains following whenever we've seen something like this. And so I think this is really important to take a look at and for you to know about. So I want to just take a quick look, talk about it today, give you all the information that you need, and then of course you can make your own decision because you are managing your own money, so you should not just be listening to random people on the internet. But I do think that this is something that you should be very, very concerned or at least considerate of, because it could lead to some pretty interesting following on events. So anyway, let's go on ahead, we'll move right along and we'll take a look at the crypto bubbles to start, just to give a quick look at the chart or at the market today as it seems to be. So we can see here a green day, got some reds here in and about, but I think it's very clear to see we do have more greens than reds, and we do actually have some greens here that are doing quite well. So, we're going to be keeping an eye on this on the chart overall. If you look here, we can see Kaspa up 1.1% on the day. So nothing too crazy overall, but we are starting to see a little bit of a bounce after what's been a pretty rough week overall. You can see here Kaspa down 18.3%, Pi 16, Solana 13. We can see memes down pretty decently as well, with Bonk, WIF, and Doge anywhere between like 15 to 25%. Pepe down about 16%. So there's a lot of different coins here that are obviously down a pretty decent bit. We have White here. This is kind of like a new release. This is kind of the only one that's done relatively well. Most of the rest of the market is down. However, we are starting to see something, as I mentioned, on the Kaspa chart specifically, that I think is indicating some pretty interesting things. Now, if you look here, we can see we've just hit a bottom coming outside of the Bollinger Bands. We hit a bounce off of this pretty strong level of support. We've seen this be kind of like swing lows before. And we've also seen the RSI not get quite to oversold, but get fairly close. And again, this is on the daily. And when we see these types of things happen on the daily chart, this usually means they tend to hold at least just a little bit more weight. So it is a little bit worth considering over something like on the 5-minute chart. We might see these things get overextended all the time. Now you can see here the last time that we saw these get overextended to the upside was back here in mid-May. And since then, it's basically been down only. You can see this basically if we look over a lot of the time. The last time we hit the bottom, we actually went and we did a run from about 5.2 cents all the way up to about 10.9 cents before we started to see a sustained pullback. So that's over a 2x. Same thing here. We saw a low of about 5.6 cents, hitting highs of about 8.2 cents before we start to see a pullback. And then you can see, another here, another here. This is a fairly common but not frequent occurrence, which is why I'm saying that it's rare that we're seeing this happening right now, because this could be potentially a really strong time to take a Kaspa trade just because of all the things that we have seen in the past. You can see here, even on this one, when we did hit that bottom overextended outside of the Bollinger Bands, we weren't even in oversold as well from an RSI perspective, and then we did turn and take this quite nice of a swing trade. And so this could be a similar setup, which is why I wanted to talk to you guys about it today and just analyze exactly why we could be seeing this type of thing. Now, of course, we've seen, as we talked about, this has been a very, very strong level of both support, both here, and then a very strong level of resistance, both here and here. And then again, turning it into a sort of type of support when we kind of had this little bit of a swing back at this range. We didn't quite get there, but you can see, again, as with all support and resistances, nothing's ever exactly like a bright line. It's usually a little bit of a zone. So for example, we probably could do something a little bit like this and call this kind of the support and resistance zone. We can see here we've got a lot of wicks kind of coming down into it as well as up into it. And then we can also see here this does actually hit this, and then we've hit this and kind of run through it multiple times over the past couple of days. So definitely a really strong level of support and resistance. If we break below this, then obviously we could see a further continued move to the downside, potentially bottoming out around this like 5 to 5.5 cent range. And if we do bounce, then we could see something moving back up towards that 10 cent range, maybe even up to the 12, even 13 cent range if we're kind of like best case scenario, which of course would be a really, really good thing. But right now, I think we're starting to see that we have seen that bounce. So this, I would say, is a pretty low risk, high reward trade. And we can show you exactly what this would be looking like. Let's just say we were to take a long position right now. We could do something kind of like this. We'll take the long position. We'll put the stop loss kind of just below this swing low, because again, if we do break below this, we're likely going to be continuing, and we will have broken the structure as well. You can see here higher highs, higher lows. We've sort of brought in a higher low from this perspective, but if we do swing back up, then we could potentially see a higher high, and that would invalidate some of this. And then realistically, we could take profit all the way up, I would say, into this range. If we're really looking to be a bit greedy, we could maybe even go up into this range, but this is probably what I would say. And then we could have multiple different profit taking points as well. We could do something maybe here, and then finally up in here. If we were to do something like this, this is a risk to reward ratio of 5 to 1. So if we were to just take a full 100% take profit at this range, that would mean we'd be winning $5 for every $1 that we've risked to the downside. So this is, of course, a really, really strong asymmetric trade to take, and something that can really end up playing out quite well. Again, if it ends up going in our direction, but if it doesn't, you just have to remember, with like the expected value of this, we could take for every 5 of these trades, as long as we win 2, we're profitable. And realistically, as long as we win over 1, in this case, if we're talking just about 5 trades, it would have to be 2. But let's just say if we took 100 trades, as long as we won 21 of them, we would be profitable. And so that's the really important piece to note here, is that this is the type of asymmetric trade that I usually quite like, and I'm usually looking for as well. So I just want to show this to you guys, so you can see kind of some of these types of setups that are, in my opinion, some of the best trade setups to have. Again, if this doesn't end up working and we do end up breaking through, there is that kind of opposite world where we could maybe break down, come back up, get rejected by this resistance, and then look for a continuation to the downside, where we'd be taking a similar trade, but just as a short. So let's just say, we'll just do that, and I'll draw kind of a potential future of what we could see here. And just got to get to the brush. Okay, cool. So let's say we go down here, we break, we come back, we get rejected, and then we start to make our way back down, and this is where we see our entry. Okay, so if we were to see something like that, then we'd probably take this trade and we put it maybe along this high right here, and then we'd be looking for lows down into, like, let's just say this range. Now here, if you look, this is not as asymmetric of a play. This is only about a 1.22 to 1. So you of course need to be much, much more accurate with this type of trade, but it still can work out pretty well. So that is one thing that I wanted to mention, and why I kind of like this play back to the upside, is because it is a little bit more asymmetric than if we were to see a similar play like this, but to the downside. Just because of where we're at on the chart right now, just because we're sitting at some more lower than standard areas to be looking, or a little bit more than lower than average areas, at least from like historically what we've been seeing. Of course, this has not really been a great time for altcoins generally. And so that's one thing that I just wanted to go over and talk to you guys about today, and kind of my plan and what that could look like for the Kaspa coin. Now again, if you are interested in trading Kaspa, we do have that link in the description below to BTCC, where you will get a 10% bonus on your first time deposits, which is awesome. It's free money. If you're interested in that, free money is always a good thing in my opinion. And if you don't like free money, then maybe you don't take the deal, I guess. But in addition to that, they have up to $10,055 in deposit bonuses as well. So another really, really good deal there. You can see here we only have 2 positions open. I actually, just right before I started recording this video, I closed down both our XRP and Bitcoin trade, just because we have started to see a little bit of some less than positive things coming out of Bitcoin. And this is one of the only counterpoints I would say that should be made in terms of looking at the Kaspa chart, is because we're actually starting to see some general levels of weakness here coming out of Bitcoin. You can see here, we broke above this range. I've been mentioning, we really need to see this kind of stay above this range. We saw that bounce here, and then we came right back down, and then we kind of tried to make another run back, but at least so far it does seem that we have been rejected. So we could be kind of entering a longer form, little bit of like a sell down, like we saw here, kind of from like the January to like mid-April timeframe. And then of course we saw a bounce and a really, really nice run back to the upside. But at least at this point in time, we could be, or I guess I would say we should be prepared to potentially be entering into a period of a little bit longer of a swing back. If we do see a bounce here, we still technically will have hit a higher low, and the structure could continue. but it's very, very hard to say kind of what the future holds, at least in the immediate term for us. And so that is kind of the counterpoint here as to why this Kaspa long trade may not be a great idea. But in my opinion, again, it's an asymmetric play. And so you can lose the majority of them and still win just because it's an asymmetric play. And realistically, what we can see here is we can see that this is a little bit of a level of support. So as long as we kind of hold at this kind of overall range, we can see there's a lot of wicking going on in here. So I would be very, very careful about putting stop losses to the downside here, just because there's such a wide zone in which wicking can occur. So I'd be very careful about placing stop losses, at least on the Bitcoin chart specifically. But that's why I'm thinking that this Kaspa trade could still be okay, just because we still do have levels of support that we could respect here. However, I did just want to give you that kind of like counterpoint as to some other less than positive things that we are seeing in the macro environment. Obviously the Bitcoin chart being one. And the next one I want to show you is the total to market cap, because on the total to market cap, this is another thing that we've talked about over the past several days. And that was that we would kind of run up into this zone kind of right before kind of all-time high, or not all-time highs, but definitely the swing highs for the alt market. This was in kind of like that November to December, or I guess November to January timeframe. You could see here we were up in this range. We eventually broke down out of it, kind of drew back a little bit, and then we've been over the past several weeks pushing. But the thing we couldn't ever do is crack back into this range. And that is not necessarily the best sign. I think that's a sign of weakness from the altcoin market. And on a more micro level, not only could we not crack back into this range, we've since lost the support, retested, and then been rejected. So I do think there's a very, very high possibility that we do come back down into this range. And so, of course, that would not particularly bode too well for Kaspa. But again, as I mentioned, I think the trade is asymmetric enough that it's one that I'm willing to take, and it's actually one that I have taken. And so we'll see how it goes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. You do need to be making your own decisions and make sure that you are comfortable with the decisions that are being made and you understand the risk of loss, because of course with investing, everything does have risk of loss. So it's super, super important that you're aware of that and that you respect it, because anything can and anything will happen, particularly in the world of crypto. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, a like and a subscribe really, really does help me out. And then you can also hit that notification bell so you can stay updated and notified whenever I create a new video. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, just drop those in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do so. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.